Group practice, commitment and letting go. At times, a group that is committed to personal and spiritual development is indispensable for our inner journey. In Buddhism, the Sangha, or group of spiritual seekers, is considered one of the 3 essential conditions for spiritual progress. A group challenges us to be known by others and act skillfully, responsibly and compassionately in a community of faith and trust. It tests the depth of our understanding of who we really are and what we have genuinely attained. It supports us in our practice by encouraging discipline and application. Finally, it allows us to identify with the collective soul through our interaction, cooperation and relationship with others. A group gives us the opportunity to stabilize in the experience of personal authenticity in ordinary life, by allowing space for the inner being in the outer world. Those who choose a spiritual path make a deep commitment, but it is still only the reflection of the profound commitment to the true self. Those who remain in a group will inevitably face the expansion beyond all methods, spiritual appearances, and conventions before they reach the goal. They may choose to retain the appearance of monk, priest, or meditator, but it doesn't matter which costume they wear in the priorities of transcendence. Many of us are attracted to the outward trappings of spirituality. The mala, the robe, the picture of a guru, spiritual statues, a holy book. Yet none of these things have any spiritual value in themselves. They are of spiritual value only when we internalize the aspect of the spirit they symbolize through practice. If they are not living symbols, they are simply dead. And Buddha statues may just as well be models of Mickey Mouse and Marla's cheap trinkets. Making the mundane sacred is a profound practice. It is pleasant to have devotional objects, but not necessary. Any object can be sacred, because life is sacred. Any clothes can be our spiritual robe, and any ornament can be our mala. So long as we dedicate our lives to spiritual unfolding, we need no special things. At the Zen monastery where I trained, intensive sessions were held at regular intervals, and people from all over the world came to participate. As the only resident lay person in the monastery, I felt proud when these inexperienced outsiders came in. I loved the precise, devotional, ritualized life of the monk. I was well versed in the monastic routines and rituals, and I felt accomplished in the practices of mindfulness. These included making gasha, bowing with the palms of the hands together, fingers just below the tip of the nose, and elbows away from your sides. At each door, to the meditation cushion, to the food, to each other, and reciting prayers at the table, in the zendo, even in the lavatory. Washing the dishes was a model of ritualized efficiency, a threefold process of bowl washing followed by a rigorous process of drying, sorting, and putting away. Going to bed was just as exacting, pulling out our mattresses from under the platform, arranging our bedding, and lying down before a monk carrying a smoking incense stick slowly circumvented the zendo in a closing ritual symbolizing protection. I particularly loved processions and ceremonies when the monks walked solemnly in a hierarchical line, like so many identical Buddhas. During one sesshin, I was working in the kitchen. The kitchens were in a separate building from the dining room, so the food had to be carried up a steep flight of narrow stone steps and across a wide gravel driveway. One particular day was spectacularly windy and blustery. The gusts were so strong that the monks' robes were twisted into knots and lifted, and progress around the monastery grounds was severely impeded. I wore a lay person's robe consisting of a skirt and a kimono. I was proud of my robe. With a little help, I had cut and sewn the light beige material, following the pattern prescribed by monastic rules. The full-length skirt was made of several meters of cloth pleated and gathered at the waist. It reached fully down to the ground. My robe was both a source of personal pride and a symbol of forbearance and humility for me. I wore it continually. As with so many monastic practices, it took away the expression of my individuality by removing the possibility of personal choice. As I approached the steps on my way to the dining room, carrying a large stainless steel bowl of mashed potatoes, I became acutely aware of several dozen faces staring at me through the low windows across the driveway. Walking in solemn procession at the head of half a dozen monks carrying bowls, being scrutinized by a group of inexperienced meditators, I felt supernally graceful, spiritually elevated. I tried to project flowing movements and a serene expression toward the faces in the window. Since the retreat participants might not be familiar with the lay person's robe, I fantasized some of them might think I was a wandering foreign monk on a pilgrimage, or perhaps a visiting abbot from some distant monastery. In mere seconds, out of my imagination, I had created a narrative with myself as a paradigm of spiritual virtue eminently worthy of deep veneration. But the weather conditions distracted me from my delicious daydreaming reverie. With the wind threatening to raise the voluminous skirts of my robe, it took all my concentration to hold the heavy bowl of mashed potatoes firmly between my extended forearms. bearing down with my hips in a futile attempt to counter the uprush. Just as I reached the top step, I trod on the hem of my robe, pitched slowly forward, and with my mouth wide open emitted a high-pitched yelp and fell flat on my face. As I lay, spread-eagled, the mashed potato oozed out onto the ground. I struggled to my feet, fighting against the wind, with my hair, face and kimono plastered with gravel and potato, only to realize that the retreat participants had observed the whole mishap in minute detail. When I left the monastery, the world seemed so brash and insensitive that I wondered how I would survive. Then I remembered that I had sometimes felt these qualities in myself, and often projected them onto others, while I was in the monastery. Sometimes I sorely missed the binding power of the ancient rituals, and the discipline that had at times felt so restricting when I was there. Now they appealed to me more for the certainty and security they provided. When I recalled the serene faces of the monks, the faces of ordinary people seemed disturbed and grotesque, but gradually the gap between the idealized monastery and the rude outside world narrowed. I saw that we are all spirits in form, living, growing, and responding to life as best we can. Finally, I closed the gap by owning my inner spiritual life and retrieving the spiritual projection with which I had clothed the monastery. I understood that my spirit essentially was inner, not outside, neither in the monastery nor outside of it. And by returning it to me, I was free to express it in the world in appropriate ways. I saw that the world and the monastery were not as different as I'd thought. The world was a monastery. My life was an opportunity for spiritual practice, and the division I'd made between the two was the projection of an inner divide, a creation of my mind, not my heart. Genuine spiritual practice always demands letting go. Any method or practice becomes a trap if we hold on to it for too long. The Benedictine monk John Main likened meditation practice to climbing a 100-foot pole. He said, as we get higher, we're tempted to stop climbing and just take in the view. But, suspecting that the view will be even better higher up, we carry on with the climb. And when we get into the clouds, the view disappears. We have no sense of progress, only our commitment to climb. So we carry on, inches at a time. Then the clouds disperse and the view appears more magnificently than ever. Eventually, beyond reason and complacency, purpose and perseverance, we are called to jump. We must abandon the pole. Abandoning the pole takes us into the boundary-less unknown, where we are closer to truth than ever before. And where Main leaves us, the celebrated Chan Master Mumon in yet another story about 100-foot pole, takes up the theme and asks, how do you proceed from the top of the pole? He answers that if you are to avoid danger, your insight must be genuine. Your spiritual attainment has to be real. Spiritual practice may be measured in terms of time or even quality, but the realization of spiritual accomplishments cannot truly be measured. It is only revealed through insight. Without insight, we will spiritually perish by plunging into the darkness of ignorance, and our example will lead others into ignorance. But if we are endowed with insight and non-attachment, we may jump with impunity. Our example then will lead others to freedom. This is the circle that the practice of the Sangha completes. As we receive help in our spiritual practice, so we are able to give help to others. It's not a question of gaining qualifications or of learning skills, but of drawing out the authentic wisdom that is deep within us all. So, our courage and commitment to begin a spiritual practice should be matched by our willingness to drop it when the time is right. Holding on or clinging to a practice is always an expression of fear and resistance. Non-attachment, neither attachment nor unattachment, means letting go whenever we are asked by our inner self. Only when we've relinquished everything we've been holding on to out of fear can we approach the profoundly intimate relationship with the spiritual, the transcendent, the divine.